In Chapter 10, we're going to focus on e commerce and more specifically, digital markets and digital goods. So, here we look at specifically what e commerce is and what the state of e commerce is today. E commerce history mirrors that of other technology innovations. What other innovations is e commerce similar to? You probably don't remember the early days of radio and TV, but perhaps you will remember maybe your parents' cassette music, VHS videotapes, and even CDs and DVDs, which, though still with us, have markedly declined in sales. The book discusses new trends in e commerce, and we'll be discussing those. B2C e commerce revenues grew 15 to 25% per year until the recession of 2008 2009, when they slowed measurably. In 2020, e commerce revenues were expected to grow at an estimated 13% annually. This slide introduces the unique features of the internet. These features explain why e commerce has grown so quickly because of the unique nature of the internet and e commerce, which are richer and more powerful than previous technology revolutions such as the radio and TV. Can you think about real life examples of these effects? So, for example, interactivity may be using a chat window to interact with technical support at a merchant's website. Personalization, when a website adjusts your preferences, such as Amazon. And social technology, uploading videos to YouTube. This slide introduces digital markets and discusses the effects of digital markets on the ways companies conduct business. We look at various types of costs that are involved in any marketplace. You may not be familiar with the concepts, but you would be familiar with the phenomenon. For instance, most all of us will recognize that it takes time and money to go to a mall to find a shirt. This is search cost. That same shirt can be bought on the web today with minimal search costs. The typical distribution channel has several intermediary layers, each of which adds to the final cost of a product, such as a sweater. Removing layers ultimately lowers the final cost to the consumer. This slide continues a discussion of key concepts in e-commerce, looking at digital goods and how these might compare with traditional goods. Can you think about how your purchases of digital goods have changed over the last 5 years? What benefits and drawbacks do they have? Music, for instance, used to be a physical product, so a record, tape, or CD, not a digital product or digital service. Here we look at the different types of e-commerce. So B2C, B2B, and C2C. They're categorized according to the nature of the participants. M-commerce is a category based on the nature of the connection to the internet. This slide discusses new business models that are enabled by the internet and e-commerce. Although many of the business models are pure play, Some, especially in the retail industry, are clicks and mortar. Can you think of examples of these business models? Some of the business models take advantage of the internet's communication capabilities, such as social networking sites. Here we look at various revenue models that are used by e commerce companies. Search engine advertising generates the largest amount of online ad spending, followed by online video advertising, which is the fastest growing format. How do you interact with online advertising? Do you watch online video ads all the way through? Do you click on display ads? What about email marketing messages? Do you respond to those? Have you experienced behavioral tracking as you've surfed the web? Do you notice online advertising that appears to be related to content that you previously viewed? Do you think this is coincidence? E-commerce websites and advertising platforms like Google Marketing Platform have tools to track a shopper's every step through an online store and then across the web as shoppers move from site to site. Close examination of customer behavior at a website selling women's clothing shows what the store might learn at each step and what actions it could take to increase sales. So, overall, this graphic illustrates how clickstream tracking works and what the store can tell about the activities of a shopper on its website. Extensive metrics exist for various types of user behavior, from the time spent on a web page to the number of products ordered and placed in a shopping cart, but potentially not purchased. Firms can create unique personalized web pages that display content or ads for products or services of special interest to individual users, improving the overall customer experience and creating additional value. Advertising networks and their use of tracking programs have become controversial among privacy advocates because of their ability to track individual consumers across the net. What do you think about how advertising networks follow you around the internet? It's actually quite difficult for any of us to know when we're being tracked by a network, and even more difficult to find out how that information is being used. Does that concern you? Why do you think social media is one of the fastest growing methods for branding and marketing? Are there social networks that you frequent? And or what features of social networks do you use? Do you mainly click routinely on ads or other sponsored content? Have you ever purchased something as a result of an ad that you've seen on the social network? Other types of social network marketing involve the quote unquote wisdom of the crowd and crowdsourcing. Have you ever supported a Kickstarter or project on a similar platform? This slide looks at changes brought to B2B e-commerce by internet technologies. Note that the internet and web technology enable businesses to create new electronic storefronts for selling to other businesses with multimedia graphic displays and interactive features similar to those for B2C commerce. Alternatively, businesses can use internet technology to create extranets or electronic marketplaces for linking to other businesses for purchase and sales transactions. Companies use EDI, or electronic data interchange, to automate transactions for B2B e commerce and continuous inventory replenishment. Suppliers can automatically send data about shipments to purchasing firms. The purchasing firms can use EDI to provide production and inventory requirements and payment data to suppliers. The graphic illustrates EDI is still widely used, but it also has its limitations as outlined in our book and is not designed for supporting marketplace operations where you have hundreds of vendors and buyers. Excuse me. This slide continues a discussion of the ways the internet and web technologies have changed B2B e commerce. One way is in using a private industrial network to link to the firm's suppliers. The text provides the example of VW Group Supply, which links the Volkswagen Group and its suppliers. VW Group Supply handles 90% of all global purchasing for Volkswagen, including all automotive and parts components. A private industrial network, also known as a private exchange, links a firm to its suppliers, distributors, and other key business partners for efficient supply chain management and other collaborative commerce activities. Net marketplaces are online marketplaces where multiple buyers can purchase from multiple sellers. The graphic illustrates a net marketplace and the functions that it can provide to participants in managing those transactions. The text provides the example of ExoStar, an aerospace and defense industry sponsored net marketplace that focuses on long term contract purchasing relationships and on providing common networks and computing platforms for reducing supply chain inefficiencies. More than 125,000 trading partners in the commercial, military, and government sectors use ExoStar's sourcing, e-procurement, and collaboration tools for both direct and indirect goods. Here we introduce m-commerce, the use of wireless mobile devices for purchasing goods and services. What applications and services do you use with your cell phones? Have you ever purchased games or entertainment? And if so, from what companies? Have you ever used, for instance, OpenTable on a smartphone? Mobile e-commerce is the fastest growing type of B2C e-commerce. By 2021, m-commerce sales were expected to account for roughly 54% of total e-commerce sales. Google Maps is arguably the most common example of location-based services. Foursquare is another good example. Have you ever purchased a product or service using an m-commerce website or app? How did the experience differ, if at all, from using maybe your desktop or laptop? What about experiences using mobile app payment systems? Have you ever used one of the various types listed on this slide? Have mobile app payment systems replaced using cash or credit or debit cards? What are your thoughts as we continue to have that discussion? Building a website involves a number of considerations. If it's an e-commerce site, customer preferences should be the driving force behind the design. What are customers looking for? How can they find it on the site? And how easily can they purchase on a site? Ultimately, if you were designing that, how will you choose the technology? What about the site's information policy? What's that? If you don't know, your customers will surely expect you to know. An e-commerce presence requires firms to consider the four types of presence with specific platforms and activities that are associated with each. We'll look at these a bit more throughout our activities and discussion posts.